Midway through October, and it is a bad time to be a ranked team. What an awesome weekend of college volleyball it was. Welcome into Six Rotations. He's Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gilman. And Mick, you could throw a dart and find an unranked beating a ranked team this weekend. It was filled with mania and madness, and we've got polls for you. The AVCA Taraflex poll we'll give to you in a little bit. We've got the Volleyball Magazine Super 16 poll. But Mick, at least at the top, it kind of stays the same. We've got a huge Wisconsin-Nebraska matchup this Saturday night. But what was your takeaway from all of the parity that we've seen around college volleyball this week?
Well, first, you asked me a week or two ago what I thought about was the toughest time for college teams. I say October. And already into the second week, we've got problems for teams being able to sustain with tests, with all of this stuff. It's everybody's chance to move up or move down, and the people that are ahead feel a lot of pressure because they want to relax. The people that are down, a lot of pressure because they want to climb back up. So I think it's an interesting month. But as a coach, it was just the worst time of my life in October. So I think we're going to see a lot of this. The mid-level teams of the challenging teams are all good enough to beat somebody and good enough and bad enough to lose at any single time. So this is going to be real interesting.
It's a great time. We're going to do a little bit of a switch up. We've got no guests. It's just Mick and I talking. It's funny enough, we've got a tidbit from a fan about these guests and how unlucky they've been after coming on our show. But I want to start, yeah, right? Wait, that's a good tease there. I want to start off by talking about a few non-ranked teams that had huge weekends. Usually we do that at the end, but I want to give some credit here at the top. How about Indiana? Indiana beats Purdue on Wednesday for the first time since 2012, finally gets the Mo Nunn spike back in Bloomington. They will rematch on Wednesday in West Lafayette. But a huge congratulations. Finally, Coach Aird gets that monkey off his back in B-Town, and I know that Indiana fans are very passionate about volleyball, so this is one of those long time coming situations. Meanwhile, UC Santa Barbara beats Hawaii and Cal Poly. They are now 8-0 with a 2-match lead in the Big West Conference. But unfortunately for Gauchos fans, this is a year where the regular season means less because they finally added a Big West tournament. So it's a little bit more about seeding. Lastly, Western Michigan keeps on cooking atop the MAC. And how about the Citadel, Mick? The Citadel had to fight off 5 match points just to get to set 4 and then reverse swept Furman, extended a long first set to beat Eastern Tennessee. So the Citadel is undefeated, Mick, at 20-0. Just huge rounds of applause to those couple teams.
Yeah, they're having a great season, but they've got arms, Daniel. We said earlier that watch out for Citadel. First couple of weeks, they were getting 18, 19 kills per set. I don't care if there's nobody on the other side. That's pretty tough to do.
And Mick, do you remember the longest match you ever played in or coached in?
Coached in, maybe, but played in, no. Too long ago.
Well, this weekend, we had the longest match in college volleyball history. 3 hours and 45 minutes as Evansville went 5 sets with UIC. The 5th set, 36-34.
Oh, my.
In that match, Julia Cardona picked up 40 kills, the single match Evansville record, tying the MVC record and the most kills in Division I this season. It was unbelievable. Here's the stat from the 5th set. Both teams missed their first 11 match point opportunities before Evansville converted at 35-34 in the 5th. That eclipses Hawaii BYU in 1998 at 3.5 hours. Holy cow, I feel for the broadcasters. I feel for the fans. I feel for the parents. And what a performance by Julia Cardona.
Can I say 1988 was not rally score?
1998. Sorry.
Oh, 98 was rally score. Okay. I was going to say there was some 3 hour and 50-minute matches in the non-rally score out there that we all played in, and we were exhausted after those.
All right, so now let's get to the big upsets and the big polls. And of course, we're going to start with the AVCA Taraflex top 5. And with Wisconsin and Nebraska staying pat at number 1, Wisconsin has won 27 straight sets. They swept Rutgers and Maryland, running a 5-1 Mick with Izzy Ashburn, no Devin Robinson, no MJ Hamill, and yet no issues for Coach Sheffield's crew. They'll match up with Nebraska Saturday, 8 o'clock Eastern on BTN. Tickets still going for over $400. Nebraska had to come back down 8-1 in the second set to easily sweep Penn State. They beat Michigan State in 4. And, well, we can just get our popcorn ready Saturday night and sit back. What are you anticipating in terms of if there is a 5-1? How do you think that shakes things up for a team preparing to face Wisconsin?
Well, I've been watching Nebraska quite a bit, and they seem to not be on all cylinders ever since they had that little incident where they had to replace the left front with the Battenhorst, and now she's back in. So I don't feel as confident, and I've been a big Nebraska pusher. I've had them at number 1. I don't feel like they're playing at that level right now. So this match this weekend should tell us a lot. And watching Stanford, I don't think they're going to lose the rest of the season. So looking at those top 3, it's going to be an interesting finish.
Well, let's talk about Stanford. They swept USC. They beat UCLA in 4 sets, and they'll have a matchup in Eugene Sunday, 3 o'clock Eastern on ESPN2. That's an Oregon team that's going to come in pretty frustrated after losing to Arizona State, bumping out of our top 5. Yep, you see Louisville has entered our top 5. We're going to talk about Louisville Pitt here in a second. Stanford will match up with Oregon, and you know, like you said, I think Stanford has an edge, but going up to Eugene is always a touchy subject. This is probably going to be the last time that Stanford and Oregon match up in quite some time outside of the postseason. So we've got all of these final matches now that the conference is shaking up. And then rounding out our top 5 here before we get to the Louisville Pitt match, Washington State will see Oregon next weekend, Friday night in Pullman, as Washington State matches up with USC and UCLA this weekend. They swept both Utah and Colorado. And now we can open up the stage for Louisville's absolute crushing of Pittsburgh on Friday. Pitt led 7-2 in the first set. They went up, Pitt led 5-0 in the first set. Louisville finished it on a 7-2 run. And, well, Mick, this leads to now Cammie Minor. Stanford lost to Nebraska to finish that one. We had Aaron Livingston on, and then they got crushed by Texas twice. Then we get Yalasheva from Washington State, and they lose to Stanford. And then now I talk with Olivia Babcock, and Pitt loses. So we are 0 for 5 in terms of guests following our show.
Well, see, it's so exciting that they forget to keep their focus, being on the show. So that's all I can say. Hey, I got to say, though, here's an interesting pun on words. If you've ever seen the Oregon floor up in Eugene, Stanford might get lost in the trees up there because that floor is very difficult. And it looks like you could hit it anywhere and be in because you can't find the lines. So it'll be interesting to watch. Watch that on TV and see what you think of the Oregon floor.
Were you able to watch any of that Louisville-Pittsburgh matchup? Now Louisville is 7-1 in the conference. They did suffer that surprising loss to NC State, but back in the driver's seat with matchups against Wake Forest. They did sweep Virginia after the sweep over Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I thought they were on all cylinders working, just like Texas was against Houston this weekend. Both Louisville and Texas seem to be back into a really nice groove, and Pittsburgh had no answer. That was just a steamroller coming at them. I'm kind of worried about Pittsburgh because they seem to be in the middle of still trying to figure it out and get in a groove. So I like Louisville. I like the way they played in that match. And like I said, there are several teams that are now back in a groove and playing very well. So it's really quite interesting.
Well, there's going to be a few more chances for the ACC to get their run at Louisville. They'll have to host Florida State and Miami at the end of this month. Miami, who swept Georgia Tech this weekend. Then you have to go to Georgia Tech in early November. And then you finish your season against Pitt in Pittsburgh on November 18th. And at home against Georgia Tech the day before Thanksgiving. So let's kind of dive a little bit into that matchup. And, as we see a rematch of the Final Four, you felt like the edge was probably with Louisville. Pittsburgh was a team coming in with all the momentum, all of the hype. and the defense is what showed Anna DeBeer continues to dominate and show that she is a legitimate candidate for Player of the Year. Do you feel like she might be a front runner even, or is that someone reserved for the top 3 or 4 teams?
No, I think if she comes on and plays the way you and I know she can play, I think she is in the running there. She has not been either healthy or as consistent the first part of the season as we've seen her in the past. And we thought maybe that with Chauncey there last year, it took a little bit more pressure off of her and she was able to really play more freely. But she is starting to pick it up and looks like she's 100% now. So I think you're right. She has a chance to be there. But think about this matchup: Pitt and Louisville. If they get into that last 18th of November match, they could knock each other out of the top 4 regional hosting. And that would allow Texas to slip in. I don't see anybody beating Texas now in the rest of the season. I thought Houston might catch them at Houston, and Houston drew 8,000 fans, and it was both days. I thought it was really a nice match for Texas both times. Seemed not to be frustrated, seemed not to be in trouble at any big time there. So these matches coming up late in the season are going to be a lot more than just wins and losses, worth a lot more than that.
All right, well, take a shot if Mick brings up Texas unwarranted. There it is. I want to talk about it. 388 hitting percentage from Louisville. DeBeer goes 15-29, holding just one player on Pitt to 10 kills, and that was Stafford. Looper picks up 10 kills and hits over 300. Iko Jones is quietly dominating through Louisville's run. I don't see Louisville losing again this year personally, and even if they do and Texas finds their way with some wins, it still could be hard, because Louisville's sitting at 5. Do you put 2 Pac-12 teams into the top 4? That's going to be a question for the committee. A committee
you got 2 Big Ten. You got 2 Big Ten teams in there.
I feel good about both if let's say you just have one loss between those 2 teams, it's going to be hard to keep the 2 Big Ten teams out, but we're going to get a committee top 10 poll release at the end of the month on October 29th. And now we can kind of get outside of the top 5, show you the rest of the AVCA top 25 poll. And with it, Arkansas, undefeated in the SEC, has a tall task this week, but for now they can relish in their first top 10 ranking in program history. Arkansas is going to match up this week with both Tennessee on Friday and then Kentucky on Sunday. Tennessee beat Auburn and then fell to Kentucky. So the SEC continues to be a hodgepodge. As you see the Gators all the way down at 17, they were upset yet again by a Mississippi State team in 4 sets. Arkansas took care of Mississippi and Alabama this weekend. Mick, what are you at least prognosticating for how the SEC might roll out? Are you thinking it could be one of those years that Arkansas comes out of nowhere or Tennessee comes and finally wins their first SEC title?
Honestly, what I think are 2 things. I think the first is that the SEC could get 8 teams in the tournament. Unheard of. That wow. If you really look at what's happening there. Secondly, as good as Arkansas is playing, and they're fun to watch. Let me tell you, the 2 undersized left sides go up there and just hammer the ball all the time. As good as they are, I kind of feel like Kentucky's going to win the SEC, believe it or not. And I want to see these matches this weekend because you've got Arkansas, Kentucky in the second match. Tennessee, I thought, was unveiled a little bit this weekend in their ball control. I believe they might be a little light on the ball control side, which will cause them to lose close matches at the end. And so Kentucky seems to be getting stronger and stronger and stronger. Rutherford's healthy. They seem to be functioning pretty positively. They're the one team in the conference that seems to win the close ones all the time.
So a huge one. Arkansas, Kentucky on SEC Network Sunday, 1 o'clock. Sunday's a great slate, of course, headlined by Stanford against Oregon. But on Sunday, we also will have UCF Baylor as the Big 12 lead the AVCA Taraflex top 25 with 6 teams, 3 of them, they're newcomers in BYU, Houston, and UCF. SEC is second with 5, and then Big 10 and Pac-12 have 4. it's surprising to see the Big Ten only have 4 teams in the top 25. We'll also have Purdue and Penn State on Sunday, which will be a big-time matchup as Penn State sits 11. They move up 2 spots. Purdue drops from 15 to 19 with the loss. The Boilermakers did bounce back to beat Ohio State over the weekend as well. And we welcome in the newcomers. UCF and Western Kentucky get into the top 25. UCF had a pair of talented wins against a very hot K-State team, and I'm excited to see UCF match up with Baylor this weekend. BYU, Iowa State will also be a fun one on Thursday.
Yeah, I like those. I really want to see if UCF's for real. They certainly have been poised. They lost some pretty good players after last year. They filled those holes. They have a new coach, and boy, they have been on a mission, so to speak. So that's interesting. We're really trying to figure out how good BYU is. Do you have a feeling about BYU?
To be honest, Mick, and I'm going to wrap up the Big 12 talk right here. We talk about BYU at home and how dangerous it is to go to Provo. And then I watch them struggle with a Texas Tech team that I've called a handful of matches this season that just isn't quite top 70 RPI. They're just not there. A little bit of a rebuild, hoping they move towards the freshman setter. Texas Tech nearly upsets BYU in Provo. Now, they got the sweep on Saturday, did BYU. They're just not a top 10 team for me. And, we could talk about our own poll and how we voted. And, I've got BYU at 10, hanging on there just in front of Tennessee because the loss the Vols incurred on Sunday. But I've got Arkansas above BYU. I have Oregon and Pittsburgh above BYU. We're going to learn a lot from them, as the weekends come on, to face Iowa State and then move on into tougher conference play. If they're not home, I'm not quite sure because Aaron Livingston can only carry your team so much. They struggled a lot. And then meanwhile, Iowa State struggles and loses to Kansas State. And that really throws a wrench into things as Iowa State and Minnesota drop out of the poll. The Big 12 could similarly get 7 or 8 teams in like they did 2 years ago.
I think 7 is legitimate right now, the way they're going. Your team, Kansas, is there again, not again. RPI is way lower than what the coaches are voting them. So their potential, I think, is what's scary. Now they've got to start producing in this last half.
Kansas dropped out of the Volleyball Magazine poll, and we can look at that here, and we can look at it later too. They only played 1 match this weekend, and it was a win. And so that's where it's surprising to me. I kept them in my top 15. I really enjoy Kansas. That's a team that I'm excited to see because they made that run in the Sweet 16 2 years ago. They get back and make it into the round of 32 last season. But Mick, I'm going to give you your moment here. Texas, Houston, you mentioned it, a record 7,000 fans at Houston on Saturday, the most for a Cougars women's sporting event ever. Great crowd. Houston tied 1 apiece, led 22-18. And then it just comes down to these Texas late set comebacks. Where did you see in that 3rd set late for the Longhorns?
Well, I thought their athleticism won the match. Houston played a very good match. They never started well, either of the matches that I watched, but they came back. They were comfortable. They played, but their foot speed on defense really hurt them a great deal on certain balls. And the balls that hit the floor normally would not hit the floor with some teams' defense. They're a little limited there. But Texas did not give them any opportunities. This is the first time I've seen Texas two times in a row on the road just take control of the ball. Skinner was the best she's been. She was really comfortable playing in front of the home crowd. She hit high and deep to 5. She tipped when she needed to and found open holes. She played good defense, and her blocking was exceptional. So if she can now start to lead like this, the Texas team is really good. And Molly Phillips went over the top of people this weekend. We haven't seen that before. 6'3" right side player, but she usually goes around and down with some pretty sneaky shots that always score. But this weekend, she looked physically really good, high and over the top.
Now, the challenge for Texas will come next weekend. They'll have a matchup at TCU this Wednesday, and then the 2 home matches against Baylor, the final Big 12 matches between Texas and Baylor ever. I'm going to be at the Friday one. I'm sure you'll be at both. Thursday is on FS1 at 8 Eastern. Friday will be 8 o'clock on Longhorn Network. I can't wait. If you're going to be in the Austin area, go ahead and reach out to us. Excited to meet some fans and catch what the Gregory Gym hype is really like on October 27th. And then for Texas, you get West Virginia, Kansas State, Cincinnati, Iowa State. And the one huge test is going to come at UCF on maybe like a lazy 2 p.m. Eastern afternoon kind of atmosphere on a Saturday. That might be the one that you can circle if Texas is going to lose a conference matchup. But let's keep it rolling here. We've talked about a lot of the great matchups this weekend, but one more huge upset over the week, actually two more. Let's talk a little bit about Arizona State. Arizona State comes into last week undefeated. They get wiped out by Stanford and then lose to a winless Oregon State team just to come back and sweep Oregon. I don't even know what to do with this Sun Devil team. And I put them in my top 16 on the Volleyball Magazine Super 16 poll that you can see. And what do you make out of them? I mean, it's just one of those wild things where you never know, kind of Team of Destiny vibes in a way.
What I would say about Arizona State is whoever plays them, scary. If they show up, you're going to have a match on your hands. If they don't show up, you just don't know. It's one of those teams, I think, that's trying to really find themselves. They can play as the underdog well. They don't play as a champion well yet, but they're starting to get the idea that they can. So they've got to beat the teams they're supposed to beat and still do what they did against Oregon.
Next Sunday, Arizona State at home against Stanford. And then as we take a look at some of these Oregon stats, and it's tough to watch if you're an Oregon fan. They're out hit 228 to 127. Oregon held to a less than 100 hitting percentage in sets 2 and 3, out-aced 6-1. The blocks were 10-6. And in terms of Arizona State, it's Marta Levinska. 12 kills, 30 swings. Don't worry, Sun Devil fans. We won't try to get her on the show just yet. Not before the Stanford match. Not with our track record. But the loss at Oregon State, maybe just one of those fluky situations where you feel like you fall behind. Arizona State won the first set, lost sets 2 and 3, dominated the fourth set, Mick, 25-13, just to see Oregon State hold them to a 154 hitting percentage in the fifth set. And the Beavers get that first Pac-12 win. They were 0-6 in the conference beforehand.
I think they got 2 wins this weekend. That's their first 2 wins in the conference. And that might be something to watch because the new coach, new players, they're finally starting to get it together and they're playing pretty well right now.
Yeah, but for Levinska, she had 22 kills, 4 blocks, 8 digs against Oregon State. She dominated against USC and UCLA last weekend with double-digit kills in both. Had 30 kills to tie the ASU record in the win over Cal a few weeks ago. Certainly someone to start keeping tabs on. We'll talk more about it next week when Arizona State and Stanford match up. And then, Mick, lastly, I want to talk a little bit about the Big East. Creighton stays in our top 25, but now everyone's looking up at St. John's, who beats Marquette and wins the first half of the season in terms of the Big East hype. Where do you see the Big East falling? I'm not sure any of the teams deserve a top 16 seed, though.
No, I think not. However, one of the RPIs has Creighton 15. And so it's interesting. You have 3 different kinds of RPIs. You have the the KP RPI, which is a basketball RPI that doesn't have them high. You have the RPI, the old RPI, that has them at 15, and then you have the third unofficial NC2A RPI ranking, which has them lower. So, yeah, I think they're going to beat each other up to where none of them gets to host a first round.
Yeah, I agree. And that's just a spot where I'm excited for that Marquette Creighton rematch, and then probably again in the Big East Championship like we usually see. All right, Mick, one last time we'll remind everybody what we've got this weekend. Wisconsin at Nebraska Saturday night. Wisconsin will face Ohio State on Wednesday. Do you feel like this is the last chance for Ohio State? They've got 2 more big matches here this week.
I think Ohio State's done, but if they lose both of these matches, and the other one is it with Purdue that they have? Who's their second match with?
Purdue. Let me check. Ohio
State has Indiana. and Indiana's hot. If they lose both of these matches, Ohio State will have a losing record and really is going to have a hard time getting into the tournament. That's what's hurting the Big Ten right now. They're going to lose teams that normally get into the tournament. So, yeah, I think Ohio State has to do something exceptional here. If I'm Wisconsin, I watch out for that match.
And then what about Minnesota? Another team that's kind of sitting in there in purgatory. They've got a couple must-win matches again, Rutgers and Michigan State, and then they go to Purdue next Thursday, and the big one on Fox. Remember, October 29th, volleyball will be on Fox Prime. It'll be Wisconsin, Minnesota, Ohio State, Michigan, depending on where you're located. That feels like one where Minnesota can kind of get back in the picture, right? With a couple wins next week over Purdue and maybe Wisconsin. And then they've got Ohio State and then Purdue again. The schedule, Ohio State twice, Purdue twice, Nebraska and Wisconsin left for Minnesota ahead of them.
Well, I tell you what, they're walking on fire right now because they have to produce these next 4 matches. They have to have at least 3 wins. And if they don't, I fear that they're going to implode because with their talent, they're kind of underachieving so far. And they need to regroup, get it together, and come out and take care of business and get back in the hunt. Boy, if they don't, I just don't know where they're going to end up, but I don't want to play them in the first round.
Yeah. A couple teams I wouldn't want to play in the first round that may not be in that top 20, top 16. That's where this is going to be really fun. This might be the best year for non-seeded teams. Keep an eye out on that opening weekend.
This might be like the basketball tournament. First and second rounds have not characteristically been this much fun, but this year the first and second rounds may be like NC2A men's basketball.
I hope so. And then lastly, let's talk a little bit about the Volleyball Magazine poll that we both vote in. Dayton and Florida, the final 2 seeds. Dayton gets in for the first time. Arizona State stays in. I left out Georgia Tech and I left out Florida for my top 16. I think Kansas deserves to be in it. I also think Kentucky is a top 16 team now, and I think it sounds like you do too. Where do you put Florida and Dayton?
I put Florida out. I'm okay with Dayton in right now because I think they've earned that. They're taking care of business. I had Kansas as my 16th team, but as I look at all of the other data, I think Kentucky's 18 and they could slip into the top 16 next week if they take care of business this week.
Looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to seeing if Florida can get back in the picture, but if not, it's just one of those things that, you lose your star setter and Muff just has not been the high level setter that Florida needs. And Mississippi State takes care of business. The Gators, not quite sure who they have, but let me check real quick here while we look at it. And then, Mick, in terms of the other matches we talked about, you've got Arkansas, Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, Purdue, Penn State, UCF, Baylor. Which one are you most excited about in those?
Well, all of them are matches that I'm really interested in because they make so much of a difference in the middle of the pack. And you might say, well, what do you care if they're not going to win the national championship? But think about this. All of these teams want to host first round. They have to be in the top 16 to get a first round hosting position. So the battles are really big there. Then if you start looking at the top 6 teams, all 4 of them are going to get to host regionals. So that battle is really, really exciting too. So we have a number of different level battles here going on. And this weekend, we got 4 or 5 teams that are trying to get in the top 16. They have got to win. And it just keeps going. So how can you not enjoy this?
It'll be great. The Gators are at Texas A&M receiving votes on Friday, at Ole Miss the following Wednesday. So just one match this weekend for Florida. Then they go to Ole Miss next week, and then back-to-back at home, 3 in a row, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky. That's going to decide the Gator season right there. So Florida fans don't need to worry too much until those 3 all in the Exact Tech Arena, the O-Dome. Excited to kind of see how things work out in the SEC. That might be the one that's the most up in the air right now in terms of conferences. So Mick and I will be back next week. We cannot wait to break everything down. And as always, lock in Saturday, 8 o'clock, Big Ten Network. As big of a match as it comes every year, it feels like Wisconsin at Nebraska is epic. Will it be another 5-set thriller, or will Nebraska own Wisconsin like they did last season? Let's find out We're excited to tune in. As always, he's Mick. I'm Daniel, and this is Six Rotations.